Hey, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Mission Matters. My name is Adam Torres, and if you'd like to apply to be a guest on the show, just head on over to missionmatters.com and click on Be Our Guest to apply. All right, so today I have Scott McCrady on the line, and he's CEO over at SolCyber. Scott, welcome to the show.
Hey, Adam. Good to see you. Thanks for having me on.
All right, Scott. So we got a lot to talk about today. So we're going to definitely talk about ways that SolCyber is helping to solve the two-part security problem for tech startups. I want to get into your background, how you got started in the industry and a whole lot more. But before we do that, we'll start this episode the way that we start them all with what we like to call our Mission Matters Minute. So, Scott, at Mission Matters, our aim and our goal is to amplify stories for entrepreneurs, executives, and experts. That's our mission. Scott, what mission matters to you?
Hey, Adam, and thanks for having me on to all the people out there. For SolCyber, there's something around the security space, and then obviously there's something on the personal side too. So I've been in the tech world for almost my entire career, but
Mm,
relatively early I got into cybersecurity.
mm,
And the reason was tech was interesting from a cerebral standpoint, making computers
mm,
talk to each other was just fascinating. But cyber had this mission of making a difference in protecting organizations.
mm.
And so when I got into cyber, it took this concept of how do you make tech interesting and sort of put in a little bit of this helping others aspect to it. There are a
Mm.
few things as satisfying as seeing something sort of horrible happening and being able to
Yeah.
see it and then stop it and respond to it and allow that customer to say, wow, that's really great that we had this really minimal thing that could have been this really big problem. It's just a
Mm.
very satisfying aspect. And I think it ties into sort of just a broader ethos for Scott, which is um, I've always been a big, my dad was a minister. So
Mm.
like being healthy, I used to do a lot of work with teens on like how to be successful and how to, get into your career and what are the most important things in life. And so for whatever reason, it just seemed like a natural fit between sort of how do you keep yourself healthy, both physically and mentally, and how do you progress your life. And so in the cyberspace and obviously with Soul Cyber, this ability to keep customers healthy and sort of focus on um,
Mhm.
their mission, not like dealing with bad actors, really makes a difference.
Yeah. I want to, and thank you for sharing that. Love bringing mission-based individuals on the line to share, why they do what they do, how they do it, and really what we can all learn from that so we all benefit and grow together. So great stuff there. I want to go back to to your earlier days. You mentioned when you got started. Like how long have you been in the business and what was your entrance?
So I've been in the business. I've been in tech my whole life.
Yeah.
I got in. I think one of my very first jobs. My best friend's parents owned a janitorial company, and
Mm,
they had for anybody who's been around a minute, they actually had this like Novell server in a closet that they would use to do a variety of things, and it was having problems. And I went in there and fixed it, and got some print jobs working and all this other jazz. So on the tech side, it's been almost my whole life.
yeah.
But when it comes to specifically in jobs, uh, cyber was something I sort of fell into. And so
Mm,
coming out of university, I was just a network engineer. So I was building networks. But one of the things was in the university I went to, they mandated speech courses. Now,
mm,
I am as typical as it comes when it comes to, public speaking. I was a nerdy introvert. I make a joke consistently, which is the only thing that kept me from getting stuffed in lockers in high school was I was a pretty decent basketball player.
yeah.
But yeah, I was like an introverted nerd. Speech courses were terrifying. And so, but they were mandatory, and it was sort of like
Mm,
Toastmasters. And so, over your 4 years of university, you had to go through these speech courses. So when I got out, I was doing a lot of networking work, but I kept getting sent to customers. So I was one of the
mm,
few engineers where they felt comfortable putting me in front of a customer and to be able to talk about the things that we were building. So I was with a very, very
mm,
large consulting organization. But generally speaking, I was building stuff on the back end.
mhm,
And because of that, when cyber started becoming a thing, I got moved into the cyber organization. And relatively quickly, my job morphed into this weird job of delivery,
mm.
like building the network, building the cyber, but then also getting sent out to customers just to talk about why cyber matters in this new world of web
Mhm.
hosting. So you can imagine, 20 years ago, maybe I got sent like UK Gov or something like that, some big company.
Yeah.
They're trying to get online. They're trying to make, services available online, and security around that was sort of a new and nascent thing. So it's like, why do we need that? Why do we need firewalls? Why do we need intrusion detection systems? And that was
Wow.
sort of how I got on this journey
That
of
was the
cyber.
that was the early days. Like if you're
Very
thinking
early
about
days.
it, when I think about like I had somebody on the show and they were talking about when Google was first around, they were first like buying advertising or keywords and like
Hmm.
one of them I know Quicken Loans, right?
Yeah, of
He was
course.
talking about he was a large for everybody that's listening, I'm sure everybody knows largest one of the largest, if not the largest mortgage broker in the country. And he was talking about buying the keyword mortgage for them. And he was telling me the price that he'd get it from. And this was on an interview, by the way. And I was just thinking
Hmm.
about like, wow, they were printing money and they just didn't, you know what I mean? Like you didn't know it was so early on. But on the other side, as a service provider, to explain a firewall, to explain all these things, there wasn't a CIO. Was there? I don't know if there was a CIO type position. I don't even know if those were around yet, but
It was like it was like the,
how did you sell it? Like I gotta know, like how did you sell it? And because that relates to new technologies or new things. There's people out there right now trying to sell new with AI. They're trying to sell new. I'll use your word, novel, things.
hmm
Like how did you sell
hmm
it? Like in those early days, if you remember. I know it's a while ago, but
No, so it was just funny because there was always somebody in charge of tech at the
hmm
company.
yeah,
So, obviously networks have been around since, before I went to college. So there's always somebody that was buying the desktops and connecting them
yeah,
in these large companies or organizations. Web hosting. So this is like the
mm,
very early days. And then most of these companies had a web presence, but it was literally like, you know, SolCyber.com, and it was just a
yeah.
web page of like, hey, we're the FBI. These are the things the
Landing
FBI
page.
does. Yeah, it
Yeah.
was a landing page. Perfect. There were no services delivered. And so this was the beginning of service delivery through the web. I mean, this was,
Mm,
God bless, I really hate sounding this old, but I mean, this was like you still called your broker to buy like a stock. There was no E-Trade, right? Or
yeah,
Robinhood or whatever everybody's.
yeah.
I mean, so this concept of delivering services through the web was what everybody
Mhm,
was like, okay, we've seen it being done. We need to get on that train. And
mm,
so you would you would go in and talk to them about that. And invariably they'd be like, well, if we're going to deliver this thing, how do we make sure that this piece of data, whatever, that whoever is supposed to have access to it has access to it. And back then it was so simple, which was you've got a firewall that allows only a certain stuff, it's just a segmenting device, right? It allows this thing in and doesn't allow that other thing in. So this can go out and this can't go out, right? And so that made sense to people. Like it's just a front door, right? And it's got
yeah,
some level of saying who can come in, who can go. And then we had these things called, and these were brand new, by the way, intrusion detection systems. And we were like, okay, so obviously people can get in that shouldn't be getting into your front door. Maybe you let the wrong person in. And so now you have to have like your alarm system, right? So you need to be able to know that if somebody's moving around the house or the building. And that was like it. And they're like, oh, okay, I sort of get it. And and sometimes that meeting would take an hour, but basically we just regurgitate the same like story because everybody really got it was a very simple analogy around, a front door, a locked front door and some sort of alarming system, right?
Man, that's a great one. That's great because you
Yeah.
get it instantly. That's still great to explain it that way, honestly. If you think about it, it's more still a
Well,
great way.
now we're like now think of it like a marine base or a military base, right? You've got
Mm,
ditches and you got walls and you got perimeters and you got lasers and so anyway, it's a lot more complicated
mm,
now. But the physical to digital analogy still works.
mm. Let's switch it up a bit here, Scott. I wanted to get into Soul Cyber a bit more. So first off, let maybe tell us a little bit more about the company and where you're at present day.
Perfect. So managed security services is where I spent most of my career. So once I sort of got out of building stuff, we went into delivering services for
Mhm.
customers. Most of that was to very large companies, global
Mm,
1000s type thing. I was talking to Jai, your producer, and I lived in Asia for a while. I lived in Europe
yeah.
for a while. So I've had a really great career. But like all things, it's been around for 20 years. And the old model of essentially saying, hey, there's some data coming from your company, that's security data. We're going to
Mhm.
run it through a system and we're just going to send you alerts based on like IP addresses
Mhm.
is very long in the tooth. It is a very old and outdated system. And so we were like, does the world need another MSSP? And the fundamental idea was um, identity is going to become the new battleground. And so an
Mhm.
identity based MSSP from a technical standpoint. So the ability to find bad actors through the abuse of identity is a game
Mhm.
changer. It's where everybody needs to go. And so that's the first thing. And then the second thing was, how do we have a more comprehensive capability around service, but delivered in a price point that people can consume?
Mm.
Because most customers have to talk to 5, 8, or 10 different vendors, and then they have to sort of stitch together the problem. So let's just imagine that this stream stopped working, right? Is
Yeah.
that a problem with the internet? Is it a problem with the computers? Is it a security? Do you have a piece of security on your system?
Mm.
And so you have to go troubleshoot all that.
Yeah.
And so Cyber's view was, we can sit in the middle of some of that and make your life easier by skinnying down the number of people you need to call. And so we had
Mhm.
this amazing situation the other day where uh, a customer had a problem. They had failed to offboard a person, and they were doing some insider threat and causing a
Oh,
lot of
wow.
problems. And it was on
Yeah.
systems that we don't monitor. And so the customer called us and said, "Hey, I'm overseas. I'm seeing this data. Can you help me?" And we said, "Yeah, this isn't a system we monitor, but we'll look at the data." And
Yeah.
ironically, we were able to say, "Okay, you have a threat actor that looks internal, and they're
Wow.
based in this location in the UK. And do you have this piece of technology? It's called a CDN." Right? They're like, "Yes." So I turn that off and then reset this password and then knock them off the network. And so we were
Mm.
able to help this customer, even though it wasn't really something
Yeah.
specific around things that we're doing. So this combination of really advanced security capabilities around identity, uh, bad actors log in today, they don't break in. That's so that matters a lot. But
Yeah.
candidly, customers love us because of the second thing. Like when you find somebody who's broken in using identity, they're crazy happy. But that, if we're doing our job right, that doesn't happen super often. They
Mm.
love the fact that they can call us for a variety of problems.
Mm. What are the type of companies that you work with? Like, who do you find gets the most value out of working with you and your team, whether it's size or industry, or like give us a little bit of that.
We tend to do more business. We have two primary offerings. One is made for small, medium businesses,
Hmm.
and this is about called 1,000 employees and fewer. So a lot of customers in the 500 employee range. That's
Yeah.
one product offering we have. It's just basically like a drop-in security program.
Hmm.
Usually these customers are high tech. Oftentimes they totally get it. They're like, I don't want to build this. I'm building, and we're talking to like an AI trucking company, like or whatever. So these companies are high tech. They really get outsourcing a program.
Mm.
Then the other offering we have is for larger customers. Think 10,000 employees, 20,000 employees.
Yeah.
Um, and they don't need a whole program. They already have a lot of stuff. They just need somebody to stitch certain pieces together. And
Mhm.
so we don't right now anyway, don't tend to focus on like, Fortune 100 too much. We tend to
Mhm.
focus sort of below that level with two different service offerings.
Mm. And in terms of, and I know this is going to vary, by the way, this is going to vary
Mhm,
based on size of company, based on complexity, what they need. But can you just give us an overview of maybe the process of what it looks like
mhm.
to work with your company? So somebody picks up the phone. Do they normally come to you when they already have a threat or something that's happening, or like give us an idea of just the process and how that works?
There's almost always a uh, prod that sort of starts the conversation.
That's a
In the
good word,
smaller,
prod. I
yeah,
like that.
there's a
I
prod.
said threat, you said
Yeah,
prod. Okay, go ahead. So there's a prod.
there's a prod. Well, and so the funny part is obviously a threat can be a prod, but
Yeah.
in the smaller space, it's complete. It's been, especially in the last couple of years, most of our customers come to us and use us because they are getting pressure from their customer. So if you imagine
Mm,
that you're a 300 person development, like you do
yeah.
coding and development, or you're an HR company, or you deliver
Yeah.
next generation power sources, you're selling to governments or large automotive or whomever, and they come and say, "What is your security program? Tell us about
Mm,
that." And they're like,
wow.
We don't really have one." So
Uh,
in the small and medium space, a lot of what we do, we call supply chain
Mhm.
compliance. They're part of the supply chain of a larger, more sophisticated
That
company,
makes a
and they're
lot of
getting
sense.
pressure.
Yeah, that makes a
And
lot of
one of the
sense.
benefits, and again, one of the reasons why customers love us is we'll help them with those. So if they go to
Mm.
almost any other MSSP, they'll be like, "Hey, send us your data, and we'll send you alerts if something bad happens." We will get on the phone and help them with these compliant questionnaires. So super common. So imagine that you're the CIO at 300 seats, and all of a sudden Ford says, "Hey, tell us about your here's our questionnaire on security, and it's 100
Yeah,
questions." We'll be
yeah.
like, "Hey, we support you across these 40 questions, and we'll give you some boilerplate to stick in there." That
Mm.
makes their life like that is a game changer. Sure,
For
they don't want to
sure.
be breached, but this is a very tangible thing. So on that side, on the smaller customers, it almost is um, really around supply chain compliance or some sort of
Mm.
they want to get NIST or SOC 2 Type 2
Mhm.
or ISO certified or something like that. On the
Yeah.
larger customers, it tends to be security driven. So no, not necessarily a breach. A lot of times they have a provider they're not happy with.
Mm.
They're looking to up level their capabilities. They know identity matters.
Yeah.
So they're looking at something more comprehensive. Or the big one again, when we talked to a 20,000 seat company, a day or two ago, and he's just like exactly what we described because I talk to so many vendors every time there's a problem, and they all point to other vendors. He goes, and some of them I
Mm.
can't even call. So if there's a multi-elemented problem, I need my security company to get on the phone with me. And a lot of the traditional providers don't do that. They just say, "Hey, that's not our job. Like, send us your data. We'll send you an alert,
Mm.
you know, helping you figure out whether or not there's a security issue somewhere in your ecosystem isn't really what we
Yeah.
do." So we get a lot of that in the larger into town.
Mm. What kind of trends are you following right now in your space? What kind of trends are interesting to you?
Hmm.
What kind of trends are you been? I mean, you've been doing this since I'm going to say since the beginning of many of
Yeah.
this industry. Like, what are you following right now? What's interesting?
That is the question I really love because I actually don't get asked it. I get to ask this other question, which is, tell me about AI. So I'm really
Mm.
happy that you asked it this way and not this other way. So I'm going to not talk about AI
Yeah.
just yet. There's a couple of trends that I think are really meaningful. The first one is around mobile security.
Mm.
So mobile security has been a relatively background set of concerns and noise for a lot of companies.
Mm.
With the transparency around how Pegasus works, for your listeners, your phone, including iPhones, can be breached without you doing anything. You don't have to click on
Mm.
anything. You don't have to tell it to do anything. You don't act. I mean, the old days of like I failed my phishing or I clicked
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
With the really advanced threats like Pegasus, they can zero touch your and break your phone. On
Mm.
top of that, though, smishing, which is SMS phishing, so the the ability to use what we've seen in email around SMS is becoming um, a primary vector for bad actors to get a hold of username and password. So imagine that,
Wow.
hey Adam, here's a text message from your HR company. Your bonus is going to be paid. Please log in and validate the where you want to send it. So you log in. They have their username and password. They
Uh,
log in as you, and now they're in the network. And there's no malicious code that's been dropped. So how do you know that somebody
wow.
who's not Adam is logged in as Adam? Well, they do it via smishing. So mobile threats, I think, are going to be very on the rise. We recently launched a mobile threat service offering, because we had so many customers saying we need to get our arms around this and nobody can help us. So I think
Mm.
mobile is going to be something that you know a year from now you're going to be like, wow, I remember Scott talking about that, and you're going to see
Yeah.
it on the radar. The other thing I think you're going to see is most organizations, even large ones with whom we speak, are still
Hmm.
focused on the endpoint, the desktop, the laptop, right? They are still not clear that identity is the primary vector of the threat. So
Mm.
it's so of course you have to have good endpoint detection on your laptop. I mean, it's not like or, it's and. So you have to have
Yeah.
good detection and prevention capabilities on the laptop. But most of the breaches that we see are a misconfiguration, a leveraging of credentials that they stole from some other
Mm.
location, and they are logged in now as an individual. And then they use
Mhm.
that to move around the network until they can escalate their privileges to admin.
Yeah.
steal an MFA session, whatever they need to do. And now they're logged in as admin. And
Mm.
then they can do whatever they want. They can sit and look at inboxes. They can steal data. They can ransom. They can lock everything up using scripts. So everyone's like, "Well, I've got endpoint technology." They don't need to launch malware to lock up a bunch of your data. They can do that via scripts. So
Mm.
I think this realization that identity is massively overlooked. uh, it's really hard for organizations to keep their identities, well structured. So when
Hmm.
if you're a big company, you got 20,000 employees, like how good is your offboarding? Like if you're offboarding a network admin and you forget something, I mean, those credentials are still out there, even though the human may not technically be an employee. You're not paying them a salary, right?
Yeah.
So identity is, I think, going to be the next big is going to be it is a thing right now. I think it's going to
Mhm.
become more realized as a thing over
Mm.
the next and then last, I have to mention it. We don't really know AI, where that impacts everything.
Mm.
We know it's going to help the bad actors be faster. We already know that. So we know that their ability to take advantage of problems, vulnerabilities is going to be better. So let's just separate that because everybody sort of gets that. I think the really interesting part is how does it come to the defensive side? So like us, like we're a very people heavy business. Is
Mm.
there a way to have stock agents that are AI based that look at what my people do on a regular basis and
Mhm.
consolidate that? So the first step that we're seeing is the knowledge and getting that in front of the security analysts in a more easy and transparent manner. So we all know Google, right? You go and you type
Yeah.
in your search, but if you want a multi-elemented answer or a multi-elemented search, we're all using ChatGPT or Grok right now. I mean, and so the same thing is now happening on the security side, which is instead of having to go to 7 locations and then having the analyst piece the data together, they can say, these are the um, TTP, the tools, the techniques, and the processes I'm seeing. You know, have you seen this anywhere else? And
Mm.
AI will spit back answers and say, well, we've seen this out of this organization, this government entity that's a threat actor. We've seen this over
Yeah.
here. So the first cut of this is similar to the LLMs on the personal side, is we're starting to try to
Mhm.
get the data in front of the analyst in a more clean and efficient manner.
Mm. Well, Scott, you gave me a lot to think about, man. This is good stuff. I'll tell you, whenever I get into the security side of things, and I have these types of interviews, I learn something new every time. When you're talking about mobile and what that is, I know there's going to be a lot of other individuals listening that had some aha moments as you were speaking as well. So that's all good stuff. That being said, what's next? I mean, what's next for you? What's next for the company? What's next?
Yeah, so the biggest thing is really for us, we're really trying to
Mhm.
get out to the industry that they
Mm.
really need to understand identity and take it much less for granted.
Mm.
We know it's complicated. We know it's unpleasant. It's like keeping your house clean. It's not really fun, at least not for me. I don't enjoy it, but you sort of have to do it. Um, and so we're really focused on saying, hey, everybody, like identity is a real big problem,
Mhm.
and you need to understand it, and you need to put your arms around it. And of course, we're happy to help organizations do that. So we really think, from our side, a big push around that, and then we're seeing that being interesting to sort of the upper market customers. So for
Mm.
for whatever reason, it seems like maybe it's catching on. Some of the larger customers with whom we speak. In the smaller space, they're really more interested in just saying, hey, just sort of help me holistically. Help me, give me a plan to sort of get my security house in order. And
Yeah.
we love working with them as well. So I think it's for us. I think we're going to see over the next year this bifurcation of the use cases sort of happen more
Mhm.
strongly.
Amazing. Scott, if somebody's listening or watching this and they want to follow up and they want to learn more and connect with your team, how do they do that?
Sure. Mine's easy. Scott at SolCyber, SOL Cyber. So Sol like the Spanish sun. And then obviously solcyber.com. So happy to talk with anybody. We do a lot of podcasts and calls. And so if you have any questions, we've got a great team and we're happy to work with you and answer any questions you have.
Wonderful. And for everybody watching, just so you know, we'll definitely put the links in the show notes so you can just click on them and head right on over. And speaking of the audience, if this is your first time with Mission Matters and you haven't done it yet, hit that subscribe or follow button. This is a daily show. Each and every day, we're bringing you new content, new ideas, and hopefully new inspiration to help you along the way in your journey as well. So again, hit that subscribe or follow button. And Scott, thanks again for coming on the show.
Thanks, Adam. Appreciate it.